right. I'm here with Alex Seydel, and she was a previous M&A attorney, now turned business exit strategist. How's it going, Alex?
Good. How are you doing, Steve? Happy
Doing
New
great.
Year.
Yeah, Happy New Year. Starting off the year great here. I'm really excited to get into your background or your just overall experience. And we really start with, what got you into the M&A space. So let's kick it off there.
Yeah, when I first started early in practice, I had a really sophisticated M&A partner that I trained under, and got to do deals at a very, boutique size law firm. But because of his sophistication and tax background, we were doing deals across the table from major law, like top 20 law firms in size. So I got to do all these different things on a smaller team, buy and sell side, and I just loved it. I loved that every deal was different. I loved that every owner cared about different things. I loved that the problems and the solutions were always different. And basically, I I liked it so much that I was like, this is what I want to do. But I kept running into the same issue with sellers on the sell side. Was they would get through the process, like in the middle of it. I'd meet them, LOI in the door, and we'd get through the process, and they'd be like, this is not what I thought it was going to be, especially if it was their first exit. And oftentimes even post-close, in the integration period after the company had been bought, they were like, this isn't what I thought it was going to be. And I don't think it's because they sold their company. I actually think it's because they sold possibly to the wrong buyer in the wrong way. And that I'm sure some of your listeners have heard, some of the rates of dissatisfaction post-close for owners that sell their companies. And I just kept having this feeling over and over during these deals, falling in love with these owners and being like, man, if I met you 2 years ago, the small tweaks we could have made to your business to make you that much more valuable, attractive, and ready for this process. So that's what we created with Ripple's Edge Advisors. And my co-founder is an operator. So she came from a startup and small business background.
Very cool. Yeah, the levels of dissatisfaction definitely resonates with everybody that I talk to. And having gone through multiple exits myself, I know the feeling well. So I think that's a good place to start with the preparedness aspect. I always like to kind of start with the groundwork of people that are listening. You've done thousands of these deals. You've seen them. You've been part of them. Like you grow attached to the sellers and everything. So how do people listening currently, what are some things that they can do to prepare their business? And what are some examples that you've seen that worked really well to prepare?
Yeah, I think actually the most important and first step, and I think often a step that people skip, is getting really clear on what you want. This is your baby often, right? You've built this thing, you've put blood and sweat and tears into it. You're often in the trenches, fighting fires. If possible, try to pull yourself out of that, even if just for a few hours. And if you're considering an exit or preparing to grow with the exit in mind, like we said, really take some time to be like, what do you want post-exit? Looking back when the deal is closed, how do you want to feel? What do you want your lifestyle to look like? What do you want the company to look like? Who do you want running the company? And what do you care about how they run it? Because I think those considerations, getting really clear on what you want out of a sale, what you want in post-sale life, dictates a lot of those steps and things you do to build there, to like almost build backwards from that vision of, we say 2 to 5 years. If you want to exit in 2 to 5 years, like get really clear about what you want that to look like. And I think that really helps you build those pathways about which possible buyers and buyer pathways you want to pursue. And then that also dictates, what small tweaks do you make to your business as you're growing that maximize the likelihood that those pathways are successful at the highest valuation possible.
Got it. And when it comes to like misconceptions, I think this is a good segue of like a founder coming into it, they're currently thinking about selling, they're starting to prepare. What are some misconceptions that you see when they're coming to the table and they're ready to talk?
Yeah, I would say first that I say it's a marathon, not a sprint. This is a long and often grueling process, and just like a marathon, you have to train for it. And I think there are so many folks that wait for that readiness and preparedness and thinking about kind of some of these things until they're burnt out or until they're ready to do the next thing. And at that point, that may mean likely that maybe some business, revenue trends are maybe going the wrong way, or other business metrics are maybe have stalled a bit. And that really, kind of doesn't help you as you're transitioning into preparing for sale. So I would say like prepare as you're growing. Even if you're like, Alex, I don't want to sell for 10 years. Okay, incredible. At some point we all exit our businesses, sometimes on our own volition and sometimes not on our own volition. So I just think that it is a long-term process, and there are ways to train and be ready for it, and then have it be so much more of a smooth in both execution and value.
And when it comes to timing, this is sort of the big question that is always different, industry different, chapters of people's lives are different. But in your experience, you've seen so many of these deals. When's the right time to sell?
That's it. I know it's such a hard question, and I think it's so individualized. I think it's not. I don't have an overarching answer other than the work you do as the owner to get clear on the decision of grow versus sell and why. So many of our clients that we're working with right now are doing that exact same analysis. We literally had a discussion about this yesterday. Woman growing company like crazy right now, feels like her cash flow is strong. She's bringing home a nice paycheck. She's like, why would I sell? And it's like, that is a great question. And so some of that analysis is, well, when your numbers are this strong and you're growing this strongly, you're going to get different types of attention. Also, depending on what size you're at. So like if you've raised capital, like these are all considerations, right? We have other founders that are looking at like, okay, I did either a small seed or a small family and friends. Do I go raise a Series A? Or I should go raise a Series A, right? And I'm like, well, think about what a Series A means and some of the realities of the Series A that impact what type of exit might be available to you. Now, in a Series A, are you giving up some control? Are you giving up a board seat? Are you giving up, now that those folks that are in, hopefully positively rowing in the boat with you, are they going to only accept a home run as far as valuation and an exit, let's say at 80 million? But if you didn't raise a healthy exit at 25 million when you still had a majority of the equity and, a serious number at cash to close at the table. So those kinds of things I think are all considerations. I think your own personal life, where are you? How do you feel psychologically about the business? Do not wait till you are burned out. Do not do that. So try to, if you can put some of those things in place as you're growing, I also think it gives you more flexibility if you are starting to feel like, I think I'm maybe ready for a transition in the next year or 2 or 3 years.
And you briefly touched on it there, like a woman founder who you were talking to. I'd love to sort of double click on that for a second. I think that a lot of, women-led companies that I've talked to, a lot of women founders on here, we talk about this sort of gender gap between we call it the napkin test of like a male founder maybe running into the room with a napkin, pitching, raising that seed or A, and many times women are more like collected and want to be everything put in place very strategically before going into the room, as opposed to the napkin. And this sort of concept that we talk about a lot on the pod. So, when it comes to how, like, let's say a woman's listening to this episode, she's working on a business, she's optimizing it. What are some challenges that maybe you've seen that she'll face that you've experienced while going through these exits? And that was a great topic that you brought up, where this woman built this incredible business. It's throwing off cash and profit and a salary. What are some mistakes that you've seen, or not mistakes, but things, hurdles that she's had to go through, would you say?
Yeah, I think you did hit on that exact concept well of like, I think we've all seen that stat of like a woman will apply to a job, or a male will apply to a job when he meets something like 30% of the qualifications, and a woman will only apply if she meets 90 plus percent of the qualifications. I think that theme holds true here. I think unfortunately culturally we've seen so few women in the big exits, the unicorns, right? The stuff that gets talked about. There are a few very obviously famous ones. That the beverage company that just sold. I can't remember who bought it, but anyway, that was a female founded company. And I think like,
Was it Poppy? Was that the?
yes, thank you, Poppy. I could like picture the can.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I think like trust yourself, trust your gut. I think sometimes it is really challenging. I mean, I would say the majority of the deals I was on, especially as a practicing lawyer, you'd get on and it'd be all hands team, right? You'd have the bankers on, you'd have the brokers on, you'd have the lawyers on, you'd have the principals on. And often there'd be 20 people on a call and I would be the only female voice. And I mean, I'm a millennial. I'm not Gen X. I'm not a boomer. So that's still very much a reality as far as deal tables go. And I think as owners, as female founders, trust your gut, trust who you add to your team. I think women are actually pretty intuitive when they get there and they're aligned with that trust of who they want to add onto their team. And I think there is almost a gender dynamic when so many of the advisors are male. And I'm not saying, there aren't incredible male advisors. There are. But I think just as a woman, trust your gut of like who feels right to add to your team.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well said. And just as a side note, the expense of a call like that on the on the sell side, it's incredible how it adds up.
Yes.
To the point where, sometimes you're like low five figures for these calls, and people just keep getting added and billed, and
Yes.
it can get, you add in this whole gender dynamic, it just is overwhelming on so many fronts
Yes.
for people. So as a father of a little girl, I always try to do as much as I can on the confidence side to
Absolutely.
to go about it. But regardless of gender wise, that's an intimidating and crazy situation. Like, no matter who you are, a call
Yeah.
with 20 people on it, when it's going to be a $10,000 call, is
Yeah.
just pressure's on big time.
Yeah. Well, and especially if it's your first time through it, right?
Yeah,
You don't
yeah.
know the cadence, you don't know the norms and the dynamics of and who's supposed to be leading in which ways and who in decision making in on which topics. So I do think, having an advisor that can really walk you through that before you get to those calls, right? And I don't mean just when the deal starts. I'm not talking LOI. I'm talking like general education about the process and the system and who's who and what their incentives are going to be. So, what is your broker's incentive going to be, or your banker's incentive? What is, when you, if you're on buy side, what is the banking team going to want to see if you're financing the deal? Like, really being thoughtful about kind of all the roles everybody plays, especially if you've never been through the process. I think it's just really important to actually think about those things before you're in it.
Yep. And knowing your numbers, going in, knowing your numbers builds
Yes.
confidence, and it makes you as bulletproof as you can get going into big calls like that.
Absolutely. And like on the sell side, I think owners often sometimes forget too that they think they've signed an LOI, they're locked in, the process is going, like the ball is rolling, and they're like, I think sometimes they just continue with it because maybe this is a bigger check than they're ever going to get in their entire lives, or they're definitely the first one. And I do think, again, if the process feels off, if the buyer feels off, if you start getting little tinglies, like, listen to them, honor them, talk to the people on your team, like, and that's, male, female, or otherwise, like, I think so many folks get sometimes wrapped up in that. And I think I know diligence costs are real, and I know that, sunk costs on paying your attorney's fees or any other fees, accounting fees you may be paying on sell side. I know that's a lost cost. I know that's something to be considered, but don't allow that to be the thing that pushes you through a deal and just to get to the closing table. Again, I think that speaks back. I think that often is a contributing factor to that dissatisfaction rate that we kind of touched on.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said. I like how that ties into it. So when we talk about valuation, there's many ways that we could take this, but I guess from the most basic approach, when somebody's coming into it, they've prepared, what are some levers that they can do to maximize that valuation when they're coming to the table and they've gotten that LOI, or even pre-LOI, if they're trying to maximize value, what can they do?
Yeah. So I think we kind of all know that, certain types of companies, certain industries have what we all refer to as multiples, right? So let's say you have a SaaS company that's selling between a 6 and 8 multiple right now. We know that that's kind of what the market is telling us. I think the most important part of valuation is a 6 multiple versus an 8 multiple is serious dollars. So how do we make sure that you get to the upper side of that multiple? You get to that 8x. It's not just figures. If it was just revenue and EBITDA and profit, that would be too simple, right? The range wouldn't be that high. The difference between the 6 multiple and the 8 multiple is when the buyer comes and looks under the hood, you are an attractive, transferable asset. This is something that the buyer can step into and run well, and can understand confidently and clearly, hey, this is a nice, shiny, look under the hood and things are nice and shiny. There's good process. There's strong executive teams. There's low customer concentration, high profit margins. I think I already said executive leadership, but even if I did, it's worth repeating, because that key man risk and having those, right-hand men and women that can operate the firm when the owner does eventually transition out is really important. And touching on that piece, owner dependence, like the buyer's first, and I would say overarching goal is like, is this a transferable asset outside of owner or owners? Or is it so dependent on the owners that if I step in, there's significant risk that this won't actually remain the company that I'm buying?
Yeah, the transferability. And there's so many different variables that go into it nowadays with social media, where there's personal brands attached to things.
Yes.
And
Yes.
there's a lot of different strings that
Yes.
get.
And I would even add to that, almost every owner thinks their business is not as dependent on them as it is. So again, kind of taking the time to examine that 2-ish years before you're ready or more is I think really important. And a really easy test sometimes that we ask our clients is, okay, if you were to go to Europe for 2 weeks, would the company run without you? What would break? How quickly? Who would need to call you? Like, try to walk through that little scenario, and it will kind of help you pinpoint the places where the business is still too reliant on you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Those first initial tests of taking a step back are crucial. So my favorite topic, mistakes. So you've seen a lot of these deals, men and women selling businesses, buying businesses. What are some of, I won't say favorite mistakes, but what are some of the ones that you sort of consistently see that people listening could really take something away from?
Poor buyer fit on the sell side. Telling yourself that things are going to be okay and they're going to look a certain way. So again, I think just not alignment on your own expectations, not spending the time to explore what an exit looks and feels like to you. I mean, in these deals, right, you do a net working capital true up, you do an earn out formula. So you meet these sellers that you help sell, 90 days and then often a year out post close. And it just, unfortunately, is so often, again, this deep dissatisfaction. And I think that's sometimes misexpectation. I also think it's just not doing the work to make sure that the buyer is a good fit. And I think knowing how to do that. So I think that's one of them. Another one, I'm always like, take as much cash as far as, we haven't really touched on structuring a deal. Right now, most deals have three major components. They have cash at close, they have an earn out of some type, and then they usually have some sort of rollover equity. Maximize, in my opinion, my advice to sellers almost always maximize cash at close. You do not know what's going to happen with the earnout. You do not know. It's often very difficult to value the rollover equity. And of course, that buyer is always going to tell you, we're going to 10X, we're going to 10X, we're going to 10X in 5 years, So I know that that's not everybody's advice and might not be the most popular. But just seeing it go poorly so many times, I would say maximize cash at close.
Agreed. Yeah, that's a good knowledge nugget there in terms of deal structure. So it's kind of a fun segue into a bonus here before we get to the finale of what are some of the most creative deals that you've seen that you enjoy? Because the deal structures are the real fun part, I think, in a lot of this, because there's so many creative ways to approach it. And there's such a fun creativity that happens when you have two different parties coming together, trying to find a middle ground that works. And it's a cool, like, humanizing sort of process. So what are some of your favorites?
Yeah, I think, I'm trying to think of a good specific example, but really I think the overarching thought that came to mind was when the buyer and seller truly understand each other's incentives and actually have the drive, the motivation, and the intent to align the incentives. I think that's when that integration period and post-growth sale can be so incredible. And I think that looks super different. So for tons of different businesses, and I think you can get really creative. I think there have been some strategic purchases I've done where the earnout structures were really fascinating and complex and technical. So in the business that, like, I was, right, as the lawyer, deeply having to learn about some of the intricacies of what existed in the company now, where did the owner really see the growth? And I think, Mac, for sell side, I would say make sure you get the valuation for what you've already built. The earnout should be based on where you're going, right? It should be based on growth. So like we had, I sold a multi-location mental health practice that just had built this incredible brand, and they were going into, they had not done inpatient, like intensive, it was called IOP, intensive outpatient care. So that was something they hadn't even offered yet. They were going to build that as a new offering to clients, and they built the earnout primarily on that and the confidence in what was already existing and the revenue that was flowing from servicing clients in the ways they were doing it today was strong. And the earnout only touched on this new revenue stream, basically. And it allowed, I think, the owner to really be like, heck yeah, we can go and grow there, but we're still getting the value right now for what we've already built. So I would say, like, I like those ones. I like those ones that are not, the earnouts are less based on staying exactly where you are and what you've already built, and more focused on here's the big upside that we believe, why we want to buy this company and where it can go, but in a new way that the buyer should be saying, hey, we can help you here, we can add value and help you add this new revenue stream or this new creative offering, and we both enjoy the growth of that together.
Yeah, a true strategic kind of merge, which is always fun. So that takes us to the finale. Knowing what you know now, what would you tell Alex 10 years ago?
Oh, my life the last 10 years personally has been has had a lot of intense twists and turns. So I would say give yourself extra grace, be gentle, trust yourself, know that you've got you and you can make any shift at any time. I left private practice law, 3 months after my fiance died suddenly. So never thought I would be an entrepreneur, and my life took this shift and I love it. I have built it for me and in a way that aligns for how I want to wake up every day and put my energy out into the world and work with amazing owners. And so I would just say extra grace and trusting yourself.
Well said. Well said.
Yeah.
Well, that takes us to what you're working on. Where can people learn more about what you're working on?
Yeah, so I'm technically the co-founder of Ripple's Edge Advisors. So my co-founder, Kim Wozni, and I help companies grow with the exit in mind. Right now, we're working on everything from selling a technical telescope tracking company that is preparing for exit in the next 2 years. We're selling a legal services SaaS vendor that was at 5 million, or we're helping her prepare for exit. She was at 5 million last year, will be 12 million this year, and probably 30 at the end of next year. So really making sure she's having an incredibly high, fast-paced growth, that we're putting those small structural things in place as she's growing to make sure that exit is maximized. What other ones are we doing right now? Professional services, we're kind of working on accounting firms, selling law firms, selling architecture firms, selling a studio in LA that does sound mixing. So a bunch of just different cool types of companies across industries at different sizes and different readiness levels, and really helping them kind of get to that next phase of readiness.
Very cool. Love that. Love that example of somebody literally growing at such a fast clip like that, doubling every year and getting them ready for an exit is awesome to know that they're planning ahead, and a good lesson for everybody listening that, even when you're going up and to the right, you can put these things in place, and that's really cool. And where can people find you?
Yeah, so full name on LinkedIn is Alexandria Seydel. That's probably the easiest. You can also go to our website at Ripple's Edge Advisors, but LinkedIn is the easiest, and I'm pretty active over there, and I kind of I like swimming around with all the different owners of all the different companies that you've never heard of before, and how people are creating incredible things and adding to this beautiful founder culture that we have.
Right on. Well, wherever you guys are listening on iTunes or Spotify, the links that Alex mentioned will be in the show notes. But thank you so much for coming on and sharing all your wisdom, Alex.
Yes, thank you so much, Steve. So great to chat.